Thank you everyone for joining us today for this webinar. We're going to be going over Prism Deploy Packager and how to install 3 separate script tasks. My name is Annette Goudreau and I am a technical enterprise consultant here with New Boundary. Also with me today is Nate Kurtz, one of our technical support specialists. Today we will be going over a novice task, installing 7-zip, a somewhat more difficult task, installing Adobe Reader 10, and then a much more difficult task, installing Office 2010. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to interrupt as we go along. So with that said, I will hand it over to Nate.
Hi everybody, like Annette said, my name is Nate Kurtz. I'm one of the technical specialists here at New Boundary. So today we're going to start off with the install of 7-zip. One of the big things that I learned setting this webinar up was that when you're setting up command tasks to install software, the biggest thing is knowing what command you actually need to run. Now, personally, off the top of my head, I don't know what the command line to install every piece of software ever invented or ever written has ever been. So it means I'm going to have to pop open a web browser, hit Google, and do some searching. So for 7-zip, I searched 7-zip silent install, and for me, it was the very first article that came up. Your mileage may vary. And down here at the very bottom, they have got how can I install 7-zip in silent mode. They have 2 different installers. There's an EXE and an MSI. Personally, I'm using the MSI, so this right here would be what I would need to run the install. Now, mine is a little bit different from some of the experimenting that I did. The command that I am actually running is /I and then the network path to where the MSI is located, followed by the /QN switch. Now the /I and the /QN are default options for MSI exec, which is a command line tool that you can run to install MSIs, obviously. And not all MSIs necessarily have them. They're supposed to, but not everybody authors their MSIs in the way that they should be. So whenever you get an MSI, it's something to bear in mind that you should do some testing to make sure that these switches do in fact work. Now when setting up the task, when you come to the task and you set it up, the command line that we're actually running, the particular command, is MSI exec. And anything after that is being passed in as a parameter or a switch. So we actually put that down here in the command options line. And then under the execution tab, I am in particular running this task as a domain admin because I was installing it to a copy of Windows 7 that had UAC enabled. And if it was being run as a non-domain admin in a silent mode, the UAC call would be made, but there would be no dialog box to hit next and the task would fail. And so if you are running this in an environment that you have UAC enabled in, be very important to remember to run this as a domain admin. The next task that we are going to be talking about is the install for Adobe Reader 10. Now, in order to set this task up, there was a lot more research involved than the one for 7-zip. I ended up doing a lot of digging and a lot of reading on multiple forums because the way that Adobe has changed how their EXEs and MSIs are authored. It used to be that that's just their everyday run-of-the-mill EXE had a command line option to run it in an unattended silent mode, but they no longer do that. In order to do that, you need to sign up for a redistributable license for the particular piece of Adobe software that you are installing. Now the page that we're at here is the page that you need to go to sign up for them, and on the next page here you have the options to choose which set of software you want to sign up for a redistributable license. You would walk through and fill out everything that Adobe is looking for here, and within a slightly short period of time you'll end up getting an email from Adobe looking to verify your email account. After verifying, somewhere between 20 minutes to 3 days, you'll get another email from Adobe that looks similar to this, and it will have the link where you can go to actually download the redistributable license. And included is also a link to the PDF for their Enterprise Administration Guide, in which they talk about some of the options that you have for distributing this in an enterprise network. Now for us particularly, we're going to be running a command task, and looking at the command task is very similar to how we had the install of 7-zip. The specific command we're calling is MSI exec, and then everything after this, the /I for install, the network location to the MSI, and then the /QN for the quiet mode, is all very similar to 7-zip. Where this gets a little bit more complicated, like I talked about, is in having to go to Adobe's website and fill out the information for that redistributable license. If you were to just go to the main Adobe website and hit Adobe Reader and then download the exe that everyday average Joe Schmidt gets when he wants to install it, none of these options will be available. And so you have to go through that legwork of getting that particular special MSI with those options. The last task that I want to talk about today is the install for Microsoft Office 2010. Somewhat similar to the Adobe Reader 10 install, there's a little bit of upfront legwork that is involved. So on our website, at www.newboundary.com, we have a knowledge base article that talks about setting up a command line task for Office 2010. So under Support and Knowledge Base, if you were to search for Office 2010, you will see an article called Deploying Office 2010. And in it we talk about two different ways to install Office 2010. The second one is what we will be talking about today. It consists of making an answer file that the setup.exe included in the disk for Office 2010 will use to answer the questions that get prompted or asked for during the setup. Now the specific options that can be specified in the config.xml file are talked about here on this TechNet article, which we have linked in our knowledge base article. The other piece that is required in order to set up an unattended install of Office 2010 is you have to extract the contents of the setup CD into a folder and stick that in a network shared path so that you actually have access to the contents of said CD. When one actually comes to create the task then, on the command line, the command that we're actually running is the setup.exe. So we point to the network path that the setup.exe would be found in, and then as a parameter or a switch we're passing in /config, and then the network path for the config file that we made. And those two command options will allow the setup to be run unattended and silent.
Thank you, Nate. That concludes this month's webinar on creating script tasks in Prism Deploy Packager. Please join us next month for our webinar on Prism Asset Manager license usage. Also remember that if you have any questions about creating packages or using any of New Boundary Technologies products, feel free to contact our technical support group at 612-379-1851. Thanks. Have a good day, everyone.